Good afternoon, teachers and friends. We are from Group 10. Our topic is Expanded Forms, Mahler's Symphony of 1000. This symphony is one of the longest ever written, spanning an hour and 20 minutes in full length. It was written during the High Romantic period, with the emergence of music drama, heyday of the symphonic poem, and the prominence of nationalism. Above all, almost everything that you can associate with the Romantic era is present in this symphony, and that is the most important thing for you to take away from this presentation.
Before we go in depth about this tremendous orchestral work, let me give you some background information about this piece and the composer himself. Gustav Mahler, 1860 to 1911, the last great and one of the greatest Romantic symphonies, lived during the 19th to early 20th century. His music is central to every orchestra as he wrote exclusively for it. Throughout his lifetime, he composed only songs and symphonies, no solo pieces, no operas or operettas, and no chamber music that was properly written down. In fact, during his life, he was more well known for being the director of the Vienna Court Opera and the Metropolitan Opera, as well as conducting the New York Philharmonic.
In 1906, Mahler wrote Symphony No. 8 in E-flat, later nicknamed Symphony of 1000. This piece requires a full orchestra, solo singers, a boys' choir, and a mixed double chorus. Nevertheless, it would be an exaggeration to say that there are 1,000 performers needed. While the piece is very long, it is broken down into only two movements. The first is 20 to 25 minutes long, while the second movement is about an hour long. We have three main points as to why the symphony is clearly from the Romantic era. Instrumentation and other musical elements are one of them, socio-economic connections is another, and arts integration is the last point.
As all of us know, musical elements play a huge role in how a piece turns out to be. We will be comparing and contrasting this symphony with Mozart's Forte as an example to show how the orchestra evolved through the years. During the classical era, there were rather strict forms of music and the orchestra size had to be small because before the Industrial Revolution, music was not accessible to many people. Thus, music was not an industry yet and there was little manpower. In addition, due to instruments being of poorer quality than those manufactured during the 18th century, they were unable to play a wide range of dynamics, and therefore music had to be light and simpler in terms of dynamic interest.
Here is the comparison between both symphonies in the aspect of instrumentation. I would like to point out the use of the organ, which is a key instrument in sacred music. Another thing to note is the difference in overall structure of each symphony. Although Mozart's has 4 movements and Mahler's only has 2 movements, look at the difference in the length of each movement. This brings us to the title of the presentation, Expanded Forms. This form is so large and so fantasy-like that the music goes on and on for so long that the whole symphony is condensed into 2 very long movements. That is enough to complete the story told through the symphony.
However, music does not exist by itself. The social-economic connections that can be linked with music are also important. People of the Romantic period upheld beliefs of idealism. People believed that music was the ideal art form to express oneself. Free from images, words, and forms, it could cause one to experience intensely, as Mahler had put it. This caused people to break free from the norms of the classical era, looking towards fantasy. They believed in individualism, expression, and above all, feeling. With feeling, one could transcend the limits of the natural world and talk about topics beyond the daily conversation, such as life and death, the supernatural, and stories beyond the average person's imagination. This was coupled with the Industrial Revolution, where music became an industry. The number of professional musicians was growing in number, and amateurs were able to practice music and perform as well.
Most importantly, the orchestral size grew in number to supply the demand for places in the orchestra, as well as to give composers the freedom to exercise more dynamic control, more contrast in instrumentation, and in fact, a bigger orchestra would naturally produce a louder sound, and this was beneficial for a concert setting because compared to the classical orchestra, more of the general public was able to afford tickets to concerts, hence the need for a larger sound to fill the entire concert hall and provide the large amount of audience members a brilliant musical experience.
This brings us to our third and final point, arts integration, which on the whole contributed significantly to the expanded form of this orchestral work. Mahler was inspired by Beethoven, who wrote 9 complete symphonies, along with other composers. Beethoven was one of the first to infuse song with symphony, most notably for Symphony No. 9, the text being what we know today as Ode to Joy. Mahler, as well, attempted to infuse song with symphony. Each of the 2 movements has a different text, and we will break it down for you.
Firstly, the first movement makes use of the hymn Veni Creator Spiritus. Mahler began composing the Veni Creator hymn without waiting for the text to arrive from Vienna. When he did, according to Alma Mahler, the complete text fitted the music exactly. Intuitively, he had composed the music for the full verses. The text is religiously supernatural and is speaking of the relationship between man and God in Christianity. This is conveyed through the changing meter of the piece, dynamic contrast between voice and instruments, as well as counterpoint. The piece makes use of changing meter. For example, the first two bars are in the time signature of 4/4, followed by 3/4 in one bar and 2/4 in another bar. This creates rhythmic tension and would invoke a sense of grandeur in the listeners that highlights the importance that people placed on religion back then.
It is perhaps also reminiscent of Gregorian chant that was written without a time signature. The opening of the piece starts in fortissimo in all parts and only changes to piano in the 21st bar. Hearing that the piece starts at fortissimo, the grandeur of the piece is once again emphasized and will most probably capture the listener's attention right from the start. The first 20 bars of the piece make use of counterpoint, which is basically the overlap of melodies. In this piece, the singers are imitating one another in the opening line of the hymn, therefore producing a counterpoint. Secondly, the second movement of the piece is in the setting for Goethe's Faust. The play Faust is about the protagonist's forced interaction with other people, as well as supernatural higher beings, God and the devil. The scene that Mahler is trying to portray is the tail end of the tragedy. In this scene, Faust is drawn towards heaven, having been redeemed for his actions in the earlier part of the play. Mahler uses musical and compositional devices to dramatize the scene.
In conclusion, Mahler's Symphony of 1000 is one of the longest symphonies of all time and incorporates many elements of the Romantic period. It was written during the High Romantic era when the art movement was in full swing. I hope you have enjoyed our presentation and thank you for your attention.